Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into the incredible, often turbulent journey of social media.
Yeah, it's quite a story.
We're going to trace its story from those early, sort of simple online connections to its, well, really complex role in our lives today. We'll unpack both its initial bright promise and the significant challenges it's grappling with now.
And for this deep dive, we've pulled together insights from a few key sources. We have Stephen Moore's thought-provoking article, Social Media's Death Spiral, which gives us a really personal and critical perspective on how these platforms have evolved.
Right.
Then there's the extensive social media Wikipedia entry, offering a comprehensive historical, functional, and impact-focused overview. Pretty broad.
Yeah, that covers a lot of ground.
And finally, the shift in social media. Is Instagram dying or evolving provides a close look at, well, one of the biggest players in the game.
Okay, great. So our mission today is to help you uncover the key shifts, understand the underlying reasons for these changing user experiences, and maybe illuminate the broader implications for you, for organizations, and, well, for society as a whole.
Yeah, the goal is really to offer a fresh perspective.
Exactly. On why social media has transformed so dramatically and perhaps what that transformation means for your own digital life. So Stephen Moore, in his article, looks back at early Facebook with such nostalgia. He describes it as genuinely fun to use and truly social. I remember those days too, before every feed became this endless scroll of carefully curated moments.
Oh, definitely.
What specifically for you made those early days feel so, I don't know, distinct from today's platforms?
For me, it was that sense of genuine discovery. You mentioned quirky early features like poking or frapping, remember that? Writing fate coming out announcements for friends.
Yeah, that was a thing.
Which were a bit weird, yes, but they felt less commercial, less algorithmically driven, More perfectly captures it as a little wonderful moment in tech history, a brief fun respite from, say, university lectures. It felt completely peer-to-peer.
It's fascinating how those early threads of connection started, though. Think about the Plato system back in 1960. It wasn't just old tech. It essentially prototyped what we now take for granted, these shared online spaces.
Absolutely.
They had early features like message forums called Notes and even instant messaging with term talk.
Yeah.
What did systems like Plato and later Usenet truly teach us about human connection that kind of foreshadowed today's platforms?
Well, they showed us that innate human drive to connect and share, even if it was just through text back then. Plato proved people would seek out virtual communities long before the internet was really a household word. Then ARPANET came along in 1969, and by the late 70s, it was enabling the exchange of non-government ideas. And Usenet, conceived in 79, really built on that, becoming the first truly open social media application. That laid the sociological groundwork, not just the technical one.
And that groundwork led to the mainstream arrival of bulletin board systems, BBSs, in 1978, those little local online communities.
Yep, I remember some of those. Very local feel.
Which then just exploded with the creation of the World Wide Web in 1991, leading to this proliferation of blogs and online forums. But when did we get to something that truly resembled what we now call a social media platform?
That would probably be 6 Degrees, launched in 1997. It's often considered the first true social media site because it did something, well, groundbreaking for the time.
Which was?
It used real names, allowed users to create profiles and build friend lists, all inspired by that 6 degrees of separation concept. It was the first time you could really map your social graph online in that way.
And from there, wow, it really took off in the early 2000s. We saw the widespread popularity of platforms like Black Planet, Friendster, MySpace.
The MySpace. Everyone had a MySpace page.
Exactly. Quickly followed by the giants we know now, like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And then Instagram burst onto the scene in 2010.
Yeah, Instagram's rapid ascent was largely down to its sharp focus on visual content and, honestly, an incredibly user-friendly interface. It was just easy.
Simple, yeah.
And its acquisition by Facebook in 2012 truly amplified its success, giving it resources for massive growth. Features like Stories and IGTV kept users incredibly engaged. It just became the definitive visual platform.
So thinking back to your own initial experiences with social media, did it feel like a genuinely new, exciting way to connect? What really stood out to you then?
Oh, absolutely.
For me, it was that instant feeling of being connected to everyone, all the time, in a way that just wasn't possible before, like magic.
Yeah, the immediacy was startling, wasn't it? Suddenly knowing what distant friends were up to, almost in real time.
Now, that wonderful moment we just described, Stephen Moore argues it was, well, nothing but a brief respite. before the whole thing became a cesspit.
Ooh, strong words.
Yeah, it was a time, he contends, before people realized the truth about what they had willingly submitted themselves to. And that feels like a pretty stark assessment, but maybe not entirely unwarranted when you look around now.
Indeed. And this unraveling, this shift, is certainly evident if we look at Instagram's growing pains. We're seeing clear signs that Instagram may be declining, at least in its original form.
How so?
Well, user growth and engagement seem to be plateauing. Existing users are apparently spending less time on the platform, and crucially, content creators and influencers are increasingly dissatisfied.
Why is that?
Mainly due to algorithm changes that negatively impact their reach. It's harder to get seen. So many are exploring alternatives like TikTok or even Clubhouse when that was big.
Right, chasing the audience. And that dissatisfaction is compounded by, I think, a loss of trust, isn't it?
Definitely. The proliferation of fake accounts, bots, and inauthentic engagement has really tarnished Instagram's reputation. It makes users question the authenticity of what they're seeing. You wonder how much is real.
Yeah, the bot problem seems huge across platforms.
And beyond just Instagram, the criticisms of social media are broad and, frankly, deeply concerning. For young people, we see exposure to inappropriate content, potential exploitation by adults, sleep problems, attention issues, feelings of exclusion,
Of a long list.
and various mental health maladies. This isn't just anecdotal anymore. Studies are consistently pointing to these connections.
And it's not just about, like, misleading information either. It's about how the very architecture of these platforms incentivizes divisiveness. That's a key insight, right?
Absolutely. The core issue is that algorithms designed to track user engagement often tend to favor content that spurs negative emotions like anger and outrage.
Because it keeps people clicking and commenting.
Exactly. It's not necessarily a bug, it's often a feature for engagement. But it creates these echo chambers that aren't just frustrating, they can fundamentally erode civil discourse.
And the sources point out that while most online misinformation actually originates from a small minority of superspreaders, social media just amplifies their reach exponentially.
Right, contributing directly to political polarization and, some argue, undermining democracy itself.
And then there's the personal toll. Addiction. People exhibiting addiction-like symptoms, compulsive checking, mood modification, withdrawal when they can't access it.
This often leads to decreased face-to-face interactions, which is ironic for social media, and can foster loneliness. There's even a term, Facebook addiction disorder.
Wow.
The documentary The Social Dilemma highlighted how platforms strategically vary notifications just to lure users back. And maybe unsurprisingly, studies show internet addiction increased significantly during the COVID-19 pandemic. People were isolated and online more.
This also ties into what's called invidious comparison, the whole keeping up with the Joneses online.
Exactly. Self-presentation theory explains how users curate these idealized personas online. You only show the highlights.
Right, your perfect vacation, your perfect meal.
Which leads others to constantly question why their own lives aren't as exciting or perfect. It becomes this vicious cycle. A 2021 study found that a staggering 87% of women and 65% of men compare themselves to others on social media.
That's huge.
And it often results in lower life satisfaction and self-esteem, body image issues, and this real negative feedback loop.
The emotional effects are clear, too. We've seen terms like Facebook depression emerge: reclusiveness, loneliness, low self-esteem.
There's also social media burnout, characterized by ambivalence, emotional exhaustion, feeling depersonalized, and of course the widely experienced fear of missing out, FOMO, always feeling like you're missing something better happening elsewhere.
And cyberbullying. That's become increasingly common, hasn't it? Especially among teenagers.
Sadly, yes. Over half of adolescents report being bullied online, and it negatively affects both the person being bullied and often the bully themselves.
And let's not forget sleep. There's apparently a strong link between social media use and sleep disturbance.
Yeah, the blue light from screens is one factor, but also that obsessive checking behavior right before bed or even in the middle of the night. It's identified as a key predictor of poor sleep.
It certainly highlights a pattern that, well, once you notice it, it becomes hard to unsee. When you think about all of this, does any of it resonate with your own experience?
Yeah.
Have you noticed these shifts in how you or maybe others interact with social media?
Oh, absolutely. You see it everywhere. The way conversations happen or don't happen, the pressure to post, it feels different.
So we've talked about the golden age and this potential death spiral, but let's zoom out for a moment and look at the full landscape. How do we even define and categorize social media today? It's so sprawling.
That's a good question. At its core, social media still refers to interactive technologies that facilitate the creation, sharing, and aggregation of content amongst virtual communities and networks. It's essentially about enhancing and extending our human connections, theoretically. We broadly categorize them into things like social networking sites, think Facebook, LinkedIn.
Right, the profile-based ones.
Then microblogging like X and Threads, media sharing sites, which are huge, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, discussion forums like Reddit or Quora, even live streaming on Twitch, and newer decentralized platforms like Mastodon or Bluesky.
The global reach is just staggering, isn't it? As of 2023, 4.76 billion people, that's 59% of the entire global population, are social media users.
It's incredible. The most popular platforms by user count are still Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp, Instagram, and TikTok, dominated by a few big players.
It's hard to imagine life without them for so many people now.
And usage also varies based on individual differences, Factors like extroversion or openness can influence how people engage. During the COVID-19 pandemic, for instance, social media played this significant kind of dual role for adults.
Yeah, so
Well, it was crucial for seeking updates and staying connected when we were all isolated. But at the same time, it became a major channel for disinformation, which prompted the CDC to issue a call to action about health misinformation online.
right, the double-edged sword again. Digging into the core mechanics, virality is such a key concept, how content just spreads contagiously.
Often thanks to features like the like button or reshare options, it's what makes something explode seemingly overnight.
And then there are bots, these automated programs mimicking human interaction.
Yeah, used for marketing or sometimes spreading fake news. Sometimes they even combine with humans to form what researchers call cyborgs, creating this really deceptive hybrid that's hard to spot.
That's slightly terrifying.
And we've also seen massive platform convergence, platforms basically adopting functionalities from each other.
Like how Instagram got stories from Snapchat.
Exactly. Or X adding photo and video sharing capabilities it didn't originally have, and Reddit adding its own internal image and video hosting instead of relying on external sites. They're all starting to look a bit similar, constantly trying to capture more of your time and attention.
Okay, now let's explore the incredibly diverse ways social media is actually used. Starting with organizations, governments, for instance. How are they using it?
Well, governments use it to inform and interact with citizens, sometimes to foster participation, and definitely to monitor public opinion on various issues, and for public health education, too.
And law enforcement.
They're using it, too, interestingly, for investigations, finding missing persons, public relations. But the flip side is that it's also a platform for citizens to document police misconduct, which creates a whole different dynamic.
Right.
And in the U.S., agencies like ICE and CBP are reportedly using social media for identification, tracking suspects, even setting up sting operations and influencing visa processes based on profiles.
Wow. And we've even seen governments like Egypt or Saudi Arabia actively use social media for reputation management, right? Hiring influencers to improve their international image.
Yes, it shows the power of these platforms extending right into international relations and soft power.
Now, for businesses, it feels like social media is just indispensable.
Oh, absolutely critical. For marketing, branding, advertising, sales, competitive analysis, even recruiting and e-commerce. It's how they connect with you directly.
They use different media strategies you mentioned. Paid, earned, owned.
Right. So paid media is basically advertising you explicitly pay for, like boosted posts or banner ads. Earned media is the organic buzz, like a viral post about their product that gets shared widely without them paying for the shares.
Free advertising, essentially.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And owned media is the content on their own pages, like a brand's official profile or blog. Each aims to engage you, but through different avenues. And of course, the rise of influencer marketing has been huge.
Which led to regulations like requiring hashtags like hashtag spawn or hashtag ad.
Exactly. Transparency rules.
In politics, politicians obviously use social media heavily to spread messages and influence voters. The U.S. 2016 election is a prime example.
But it's also become a major vector for foreign influence campaigns trying to interfere in elections. On a more positive note, social media has played a role in activism, think Arab Spring,
Right.
but it also serves as an organizing and recruiting tool for militant groups like ISIS, which is the darker side of that organizing power.
Even employers are in on it, screening job applicants' public social media profiles. That's pretty widespread now, isn't it?
Very common. It raises ethical questions, of course, and has led to job rejections for some, though some U.S. states now protect applicants from having to surrender passwords.
And it's not just jobs. Colleges might access applicants' social media too, and questionable material found there can lead to disqualification.
Yeah, your digital footprint matters more than ever. Even court cases are using social media content posts. Images as evidence in things like employment law disputes, child custody battles, disability claims.
That's wild. How do they verify it?
Well, there are challenges with fake screenshots, but metadata can help. And it's amazing the detail they look at. Even emojis can be considered as evidence of intent or state of mind. Recently, there have been major lawsuits by tribal nations and state attorneys general against social media companies, specifically alleging mental health harms to young users.
That feels like a significant turning point.
It could be.
Now, beyond institutions, how are individuals using these platforms day to day? News consumption is a big one.
Huge. Almost half of Americans now use social media for news consuming it, sharing it, sometimes even engaging in citizen journalism themselves.
But it comes with pros and cons, right?
Absolutely. While it offers incredible accessibility to information, the major con is the ready availability of false, biased, or just plain disturbing content. Filtering that is tough.
As a social tool, it's used for everything from keeping up with friends and family to romance.
But again, there are significant concerns about whether it truly fulfills our deep social needs. It can sometimes contribute to feelings of loneliness or stress from fear of hacking or employer scrutiny. We prefer texting to face-to-face sometimes.
And it's also enabled less savory practices like online stalking or creeping and catfishing, pretending to be someone else.
Right. And people use it for health information, too. It can offer support systems, say, for adolescents dealing with obesity, providing community. But the quality of that information is often totally unassured. Think about pro-anorexia sites.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Parental guidance is crucial there. And during the pandemic, health misinformation just spread like wildfire on these platforms.
And finally, just basic communication. Social media enables mass cultural exchange, introduces new forms of language acronyms like LOL, the ubiquitous hashtags.
It definitely changed how we write and talk. However, it has increasingly replaced in-person communication for many young people, which some worry could delay social skills development. And it's contributed to cyberbullying, privacy issues, sexting, and unfortunately, revenge porn.
But it can also strengthen relationships when used mindfully, right? It's not all bad.
No, absolutely not. It connects families across distances, helps maintain friendships. It's complex.
When you think about how you use social media, which of these diverse applications rings truest for you? Have you experienced any of these unintended consequences firsthand? It's fascinating how a single platform can serve so many different roles, for better or sometimes for worse.
It really makes you think about your own usage patterns, doesn't it?
Okay, let's turn our attention towards the future now, because this next segment really gets into the pushback and potential changes. The business model, as we know, of most social media platforms is fundamentally based on selling advertising slots,
Right. Eyeballs on ads.
which incentivizes them to arrange their content so that users view as much content as possible, keep you scrolling, keep you engaged, so you see more ads.
Precisely. However, some platforms, like X, for example, are starting to add paid user subscriptions. That's partly an attempt to reduce their dependence on pure advertising revenue.
Which could fundamentally change their incentives over time, maybe.
Potentially. That's definitely a shift to watch.
This brings us squarely to the global push for government regulation. Australia, for instance, passed a law, I think, late 2024, banning people under 16 from most social media platforms by late 2025, with hefty fines, too.
Yeah, a $49.5 million for platforms violating it. That's a pretty strong stance, though they exempted educational and health apps.
And it sparked debate, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. Supporters cited reducing harms for young people, obviously, but opposers expressed concerns about potential isolation for marginalized youth who rely on these platforms for community, or even stifling creativity.
And we also see more authoritarian examples like Egypt imprisoning women for violating family values in TikTok videos, or Thailand threatening prison for dissenting views online.
Those highlight the extreme end of content control and censorship using these platforms as justification.
Now, in the United States, there's Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act from way back in 1996. That's the one that famously exempts platforms from legal liability for third-party content, right?
That's the one. It's foundational to the internet as we know it, but it's being heavily challenged now.
How so?
Well, recent legislative action in Florida, for example, requires age verification and prohibits accounts for kids under 14 plus requires parental consent for 14 to 16-year-olds. The U.S. Surgeon General also recently called for a mental health warning label on social media, like on cigarettes.
Wow, a warning label.
And of course, there are the ongoing attempts to ban TikTok entirely due to national security concerns about data and influence.
Meanwhile, the European Union seems to have taken a different, more comprehensive approach.
Yes, with the Digital Services Act, DSA, and Digital Markets Act, DMA, enacted in 2022, their overarching aim is simple but powerful. What is illegal offline must also be illegal online.
What does that mean in practice?
It includes requirements for platforms to delete illegal content faster, better protect minors, and prohibit targeted advertising based on sensitive personal data like religion or sexual orientation. And the fines are significant, up to 6% of global sales. It's a truly sweeping set of regulations designed to rein in big tech.
There are also broader regulatory discussions happening, right? Ideas like taxing the negative externalities of platforms.
Yeah, that was proposed by Nobel laureate Paul Romer. Basically, make platforms pay for the societal harms they might cause, like polarization or mental health issues. There's also talk of using competition law more aggressively to restrict platform market power, maybe even breaking up some of the digital giants.
Well, there's nuance here, too. Some experts are cautioning against just focusing on age limits.
Exactly. What's fascinating is the call for nuanced policy by some pediatric professors. They argue that simply increasing age restrictions might actually distract from making sure platforms are following guidelines and best practices for all ages.
So it's not just about keeping kids off, but making the platform safer and healthier for everyone who uses them.
Precisely. A more holistic approach.
So how is Instagram itself responding to all this pressure and evolution? They must be feeling it.
Oh, clearly. They're trying to revitalize the platform, introducing new features like Reels to compete with TikTok, investing heavily in IGTV and live video.
Try to keep things fresh.
And beyond new features, they've also implemented stricter policies on privacy, data security, and they say they're actively combating fake accounts, including tools like the About This Account feature for transparency.
Are they working with creators more?
They seem to be trying, fostering collaboration and partnerships through initiatives like Creator Week and offering IGTV monetization options, trying to keep their vital content ecosystem healthy and prevent creators from leaving.
And perhaps most significantly, are they making specific shifts in the type of content they promote?
It appears so. Our sources suggest they're pushing family-friendly content more by prioritizing posts from friends and family and encouraging more meaningful interactions. They're also publicly cracking down on misinformation by flagging and removing false info.
And there's a renewed focus on e-commerce.
A huge focus, yes. Features like Instagram checkout and making posts shoppable directly within the app, turning the platform into more of a marketplace.
So for businesses and influencers who rely on Instagram, what are the strategies for adapting?
The advice seems to be, create truly authentic and engaging content. Quality over just quantity. Leverage those e-commerce features Instagram is clearly pushing. But crucially, it's about diversifying their online presence. Don't put all your eggs in the Instagram basket. Build audiences on other platforms. Have your own website or email list. Mitigate the risk of algorithm changes or platform shifts.
Yeah, makes sense. And as we look further into the future, there's this growing movement towards decentralized social media too, isn't there? Open standards like ActivityPub, Mastodon, Bluesky.
Yes, that's gaining traction. These aim to provide alternatives to the big corporate-controlled platforms. The idea is to shift power back towards the users and individual communities, offering more control and less algorithmic manipulation.
Which brings us back to that big thorny question. Does social media, in its current dominant form, actually threaten democracy?
Well, critics argue strongly that, yes, it does. By incentivizing sensational, emotive, and controversial material simply because it drives engagement, these platforms actively discourage nuanced, healthy discourse needed for democracy to function.
Jonathan Haidt's Tower of Babel analogy comes to mind, where different political tribes are speaking completely different languages, fueled by their separate feeds.
Exactly. It makes finding common ground incredibly difficult. Proposed solutions range widely: stronger privacy protections, enforcing antitrust laws to break up monopolies, a general call for people to use less social media, supporting more local journalism as an alternative information source.
Or even developing entirely new algorithms designed not just for engagement, but perhaps to prioritize finding consensus or understanding different perspectives.
That's a fascinating, though technically challenging idea. Could the technology itself be part of the solution, not just the problem?
So we've really journeyed from those innocent, genuinely fun beginnings of social media, the poking and the early connections, to its current, incredibly complex landscape. It's fraught with challenges like addiction, misinformation, societal polarization.
Yet it still offers these powerful tools for connection, for community building, for commerce, for activism. It's such a mix.
What's really fascinating here is that constant tension, isn't it? These platforms were designed ostensibly to connect us, but they can also be profound sources of division and detachment.
The immense power of the algorithms that drive user engagement is just undeniable. And that power, how it's wielded and for what purpose, brings up a really important question as we wrap up.
So, here's something for you to think about. Given all we've uncovered today, this incredibly rapid evolution, the inherent tensions between connection and division, and this growing global push for regulation, how do you think social media will fundamentally change the way we define what it even means to be social in the next 5 years?
And perhaps just as importantly, what role do you believe the platforms themselves, governments, and maybe most crucially, we as users have in responsibly shaping that future?